We need to see a much greater focus on outputs rather than inputs in the public sector. You know, you hear arguments constantly thrown out by government about how much money they're spending in different areas of public spending. It's not about how much money you spend, it's about what you get for the money you spend. So it's about the output from that spending rather than the input. So in other words, we need a much more efficient public sector. We need to see cheaper housing, and that is happening. We need to see lower fuel and energy costs. We need to see lower local authority charges for business. We need to see an intense focus on the quality of the labour force. And at the end of the day, to me, this is the most important thing of all. It's the quality of the labour force that we are able to offer employers in this country that will determine our success or failure in the future. And that's why education and the quality of the education system is absolutely essential. We need an IT capability. The broadband situation in this country is nothing short of a disgrace. Alan mentioned that. It is a fact. We have one of the poorest broadband offerings of any developed economy, and in my view it goes back to a flawed decision by government to privatise the telecommunications company back in the late 90s. Because if you hand over something like a broadband infrastructure to a venture capitalist, it's a recipe for disaster. Okay, so the IT capability needs to be addressed. We will need to see a broadening of the tax base. There's no doubt about that, because as a country we had become way too focused on a very narrow-backed base of people paying taxes, particularly the construction industry. When we emerge from this, we are going to see property taxes, we are going to see carbon taxes, we are going to see lower income workers being brought back into the tax net. We just need a broadening of the tax base, but at the same time prevailing or trying to preserve low marginal tax rates. So a broad base, relatively low rates, in my view, is the way forward. We need a proper regulatory framework. I mean, one of the biggest failures in the United States, in this country, has been the failure of regulation, particularly in the financial services area. That needs to be addressed. Personally, and the revelations we saw yesterday just confirmed this view in my mind. We scrap the regulatory authority we have. We start with a blank sheet of paper, bring in an outsider to run the agency with absolutely no sentimental attachments or allegiances to anybody out there in the financial and broader system. So we need to sort the regulatory system. We need a functioning banking system as quickly as possible. And I think we also need to work very hard on restoring the external image of Ireland, because have no doubt about it, the external image of Ireland has been seriously tarnished over the last 12 months, not least by the revelations we've seen in the banking sector since the beginning of December. So Ireland plc, its external image has been seriously damaged. For a small open economy like us that is so dependent on foreign direct investment and indeed other types of investment, that is not a situation that can be allowed to persist. So there's a key role for our politicians and for every one of us to ensure that the external image of Ireland is repaired again. Tourism, extremely important. It's a high value added indigenous industry that needs to be nurtured. We need a quality, competitive tourism product all over the country and not just the city break concept in Dublin. We need to focus on service exports. We should be out there exporting our professional services all around the world. I'm talking about accountancy services, financial services, legal services, education. In other words, we take, and in the construction sector you look at engineers, architects who are losing their jobs at the moment. We need to turn those services into an export base for the Irish economy. And one company that is succeeding very well in that space is Project Management. They're out there building hospitals, building schools, building dams all over the world. There is a huge potential for Ireland to become a major high-level service exporter. We need to focus on research and development, obviously. We need to use IT as a solution provider. And okay, the IT industry is very important to the Irish economy, but I think we need to go a step further, turning the IT industry into something that will provide solutions to problems, water quality, food production, alternative energy, renewables, all of those emerging areas that are going to be extremely important over the coming decades. It's using technology to solve those problems will be very important. We need a very flexible labour market. In other words, I certainly believe that trade unions have become way too powerful in this country, particularly public sector unions. They've taken a lot of flexibility out of the labour market. That is not possible in the globalised world that we're moving into increasingly. We need effective anti-corruption laws and enforcement. We need effective regulatory institutions. And we also need what I would refer to as the Washington Consensus. Back some years ago, the Washington Consensus was a series of proposals that were drawn up in helping developing countries develop. And when I look at where Ireland is today, a lot of the suggestions there equally apply to Ireland at this juncture. It revolves around stuff like liberalised markets, competition, a financial system that operates, anti-corruption, a good regulatory system, etc., etc. So this is the sort of strategic vision I think we need to start thinking about. And most importantly, I repeat the point, we identify the sectors of the economy where Ireland can play a part and what Ireland is good at, and try and develop those industries. Unfortunately, many of those sectors were pushed out of the equation by the construction boom of recent years. That's now gone. It's time to refocus and start to pick winners as an economy. My final thoughts, strategic vision is obviously required. And I think we need to see a new vision for capitalism in this country. And I call it entrepreneurial capitalism, where there's a very significant role played by small, innovative firms. And I heard a guy from Science Foundation Ireland and Morning Ireland this morning, and he sets out a very strong vision about the whole concept of a smart stroke knowledge economy in this country. Okay, there's a lot of lip service paid to that, but we need to deliver it. We need strong, effective leadership. We need to see the promotion of a greater entrepreneurial culture. And I have to say, it worries me greatly to see one of our biggest success stories in this country in recent years being pilloried over the last 24 hours and forced to step down from the boards of 2 state agencies because of legitimate tax transactions he entered into. If we start to demonise everybody that stands up and does anything in this country, people will be afraid to do absolutely anything. He used the system, he didn't create the system. So if people like Jerry Mackay are forced out of this country and out of public life, well, I think we're all going to be worse off as a result of that. We need to see high quality economic growth, because that is the only way you solve a fiscal crisis and a labour market crisis. You grow your way out of it. Quality of the labour force is absolutely key. And in that regard, or in that context, the interaction between the third level institutions and industry and business has to become much more efficient, and we need to nurture it. There is no silver bullet out there. There's no single solution you can come up with that will solve Ireland's problems other than a strong recovery in the international economy. But we have to make it happen. It's just not going to happen for us. So I go back to the point, the 2 most important things to me: 1, a vision; 2, the leadership to drive that vision. So thank you very much for listening to me this morning. I'm not sure I came up with any new ideas, but I don't think it's rocket science. To me, it's fairly obvious what we need to do as an economy and as a region to grow ourselves out of the current situation. So thank you very much for listening.